have a plan. Have a well thought through plan. Take some time. Don't be afraid to ask your realtor questions, consult with your family if you're making a move with your family, and just make sure that you have a strategic, logical plan that you're sticking with.
This is giving you the freedom to do the things for yourself that you want to do instead of doing it for everyone else and for your house. Right sizing should be about giving you the freedom to have more time to do the things that are important to you.
Welcome back to Meaningful Moves. This is going to be episode 2 of our Buyer's Roadmap series. So last time when we got together, we talked a little bit about first-time home buyers and some of the tips for them. And we also talked about buyers who have already had their first home, but their family's now growing or expanding, and they're looking to upgrade their home, but they haven't been in the market in a while. So we talked about some tips for each of those groups to help them through this journey. Today, we're going to talk about sort of 3 different groups of buyers. We're going to talk about right-sizers, we're going to talk about cottage buyers, and we're also going to talk a little bit about real estate investors. So joining me today, as usual, to my left is Andrea Hilton. Welcome back.
Thanks.
and also Anthony Field. Welcome, Anthony.
Thank you.
So let's dive right into it. So the first topic we're going to talk about, and the first type of buyer that we're going to talk in episode 2 about, is right-size buyers. So let's sort of define what that means. So what would you say is a right-size buyer, and who is that traditionally?
Oftentimes, we can classify a lot of people as right-sizers, but typically when I'm talking about right-sizing, I'm talking about what some people call downsizing. And I just don't love that term. I don't think downsizing necessarily is what has to happen. I think right-sizing, so people who've been in their home for a really long time, they have maybe raised a family. The home may be too large, but the home just may not functionally work for them as they age anymore. So we really call that right-sizing. You're going from a home that was wonderful for you in your 30s and maybe your 40s, probably even in your 50s. But as you're aging, A, maybe the space is too much, but B, maybe the functionality of the home is not right for you. So we're going to right-size you into a home that works better for this stage of your life and maybe for down the road as well.
Okay, that's a great sort of definition of who we're talking to today. Mm-hmm. So thank you for that. So we're going to talk about 3 tips. So I'm going to name the tips that we all got together. We came up with those tips, and I'm going to ask you to expand a little bit on it.
Okay.
So tip number 1, our first tip is planning to move before you feel forced to do so. What does that mean, and why is that important?
Yeah, and that really is important. Sometimes people are saying, that hip's a little sore when I go do the laundry, and I should probably move, and they just keep putting it off and putting it off, or I'm more tired running up and down the stairs than I used to be, and people put it off. If you know that, say in 10 years, you're probably going to need to make that move, or if you know that it's going to happen eventually, you're not physically going to be able to handle this house, don't wait until you're forced to go, because you haven't had the time to A, process it, but B, you haven't got a good plan. So really planning, knowing that, okay, I'm going to move to my next home, and this may be the home that I'm in for the next 20 years or the foreseeable future of my life, or this is maybe a transition between this home and that final home that you're going to go to. Really have a plan. Know what you're looking for. Are you looking for just a home that's more manageable? Are you looking for a bungalow in a specific neighborhood? Are you perhaps looking to go to a condo so that you don't have to worry about those maintenance things down the road? Really have a plan for where you're going to go. Really have a plan for what location that's going to be, or what area of town. Are you going to move closer to children? Are you going to move closer to a hospital? Are you going to move out of the city because your children have moved out of the city? Those are all things that you need to have a plan, because it's extremely stressful when you are undergoing that process. So knowing what your buying plan is really, really going to help to alleviate that stress. The more prepared you are, the less stressed out you are as it happens.
Okay, so let's boil it down a little bit more. So say I'm a homeowner and I know that I need to be thinking about this or start thinking about it. But I also want to get that last summer at the waterfront or the last summer in my yard. What's really the first thing that I should be thinking about to begin to prepare for something that may happen next year or the year after?
Yeah, I mean, it's always good to prepare ahead of time. So like I said, knowing where you want to go is hugely important. But now we know that that maybe the space is not going to be as large. So we're going to start getting rid of some of the things that we really don't need that we've been hanging on to. Maybe somebody in the family wants it. We're going to start really taking stock of our stuff. Have a look at what you've got. See what you no longer need. See what you no longer want. See what someone else actually can use more than you can use. So really start downsizing that. Maybe get your realtor in to have a look and tell you, make some suggestions to you for furnishings that should stay in the house. Maybe make some suggestions for, freshening up the paint or doing some of those nagging repairs that you kind of walk past and don't notice anymore, but someone else will find glaringly obvious. Really start to think about when I'm ready, I want my house to be ready. So when I make that decision, I don't have to start at square one. So get somebody in early. Get them in to give you some pointers.
Great points. So tip number 2, buy for the future with the next 10 to 15 years of your life in mind. What does that mean and why is that important?
Yeah, and that is important. And we are talking about right-sizers. If you're moving up to your next house, maybe it isn't going to be a 10 or 15-year house. But typically when someone is coming from their larger family home where they've maybe had a lot of yard maintenance, we have to realize none of us are getting any younger. So the things that I can do today, I may not be able to do in 10 years. So that's something I really have to start thinking about. I love this house. Oh, there's a flight of stairs up to go to the bedroom. Well, I can do stairs now. And there's a flight of stairs down to do the laundry. Yeah, it's a more manageable house to clean, but is that going to work for me in 10 years? Maybe I need to minimize things like the stairs. Maybe I need to minimize the size of lawn that I'm going to be mowing. Maybe I need to consider what my life's going to look like in 10 years or in 15 years so that I don't have to go through this stress again of finding a new place to go. So really think about what you can do today is great, and heaven help you. I hope you can do it again in 15 years or can continue to do it in 15 years. But start thinking long term. Am I necessarily going to be able to do those stairs? Am I necessarily going to be able in 10 or 15 years to maintain that lawn? And I think that's how you should be making that purchase. It's stressful. You don't want to do it again too soon.
Great points. So tip number 3 is sort of a mindset one. You're not losing space, you're gaining freedom. What does that mean? What is the emotional mindset that is happening at this time, and why is this thought important?
It is really important. It is very, very emotional from so many perspectives. It's emotional because you're leaving the home where you made so many memories and you raised your family and you had so many beautiful dinner parties. There's one emotion. The other emotion is you're almost reconciling that, am I getting old? If I make this move, I'm admitting defeat that I can't do this anymore. There's another emotion in there. But what you really have to start thinking is, I've raised my family. I have hosted the huge dinner parties. I am ready now to take time for myself. I want to travel. I don't want to be to be, worrying about cleaning 4 bathrooms and who's coming for dinner at the next occasion. I want to be a guest at their house because I want my lifestyle now. I want to be able to travel and not be able to think about, not have to think about, oh, who's going to do the lawn? Who's going to do this? Who's going to do that? So really put yourself in a mindset of this is giving you the freedom to do the things for yourself that you want to do instead of doing it for everyone else and for your house. Right sizing should be about giving you the freedom to have more time to do the things that are important to you.
And I think it's also important to know that you're not alone. This is an aging population that we're in. And so you're not the only family or individual or couple or whatever that are having these conversations right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And knowing that you're not alone is a very comforting fact. But you've got to be in that mindset that this is a good thing. This is freedom for your next chapter in your life, I think. And doing that as part of a big group. Hey, we should start a movement.
So what makes the decision from your perspective of I'm sort of at the age, say someone's at the age in the middle. Yeah. And do I buy another home or do I get an apartment? Or what would your advice there be?
That's where planning really comes in because it is really a personal decision. That's where planning comes in. You need to talk about the pros and cons. Now, if you are going to take the equity that you've built in your house over the years and use that towards purchasing another house, that's great. But you know that's not most likely that's not the very final place you're going to live. If you're at the point where you're saying, you know what, I don't want the responsibility. I have this equity in my house, and I've always heard you're supposed to, you're never supposed to rent. Well, no, you build equity in that house so that at the end chapters in your life, you have the freedom to rent, and it's not going to be something that's going to hurt you. So if you choose that, yeah, maybe I would like to winter away, and I've always thought about having that beautiful holiday place in the South, in the Caribbean. Mm-hmm. I don't want to maintain a house here. So maybe then it is time to rent. You've built the equity in your house. You have taken that equity, and now let someone else worry about the maintenance entirely. Let someone else worry about the snow shoveling entirely. And put yourself in a position where you can lock your door and go to your Caribbean oasis for 6 months out of the year.
How awesome would that be?
That'd be so awesome. I may be speaking a little bit about my dreams, but we're not sure.
Fair enough. So thank you so much for that, Andrea. Now we're going to talk about sort of a second niche buyer. And obviously, being in real estate, we're biased. We feel, and I think the proof is there, that real estate is a great investment. And there are others that feel that same way. And in many cases, it is a way to establish wealth as you sort of work through the real estate cycle. So we're going to talk a little bit about the 3 tips that we have with Anthony Field. So Anthony, tip number 1 for real estate investors, buy the investment, not the emotion. What does that mean and why is it important?
Yeah, so as we know, whenever somebody's looking to purchase a home for themselves, whether we like it or not, there is a certain amount of emotion involved in it. So for anybody who's looking to get into real estate as an investment, maybe you've bought one home already for yourself and then you're buying the next, but it's very different in the sense that, you really need to let go of any sort of emotional feeling. You need to let go of any sort of, whether it's aesthetic or cosmetic things about the property or the house that you don't like, because at the end of the day, as far as investing goes, it's a matter of numbers. That's really what it boils down to. So, rather than focusing maybe on the layout of the home and like envisioning how you would like living there, you need to do your best to get that out of your mind. You need to be focusing on your expenses, focusing on your cash flow. You need to focus on vacancy and, how likely it is that property could be vacant and for what period of time. So that's really where your mind needs to be rather than, how much you on a personal level like the house.
Great advice. Absolutely great advice. So tip number 2, know your investment strategy before shopping. Know what type of real estate investor you're going to be. What does that mean? What are some of the different types, and what do they have to think about?
Yeah, so there's a few different types of investors, right? We have those who are looking to buy a property and have long-term tenants. There are those who are looking to buy a property maybe for more short-term rentals, sometimes student rentals, and sometimes you might be looking at it from an executive rental standpoint. So, for example, in Sudbury, depending on where in the city you are looking, it can make a very significant difference in terms of the type of prospective tenant that you're attracting. So,
Great point.
If you're looking in New Sudbury, obviously student rentals can be a really smart decision there. You're close to not one, but two post-secondary schools. Whereas if you're looking in the South End, we might be looking at people who aren't from Sudbury or maybe, on a contract to work at HSN or something along those lines. And while they can financially afford to buy a home, it just doesn't make sense for them at this exact time. So that's where the location really plays a significant role, is determining the type of investment you want to have, and then taking that knowledge and looking at which specific location is going to be most beneficial to you for that.
And I think it's important because we really do have a shortage of rental options in this community.
Yep.
We recently were referred a professional that's going to be here on a short-term contract.
Yeah.
And she was obviously a little frustrated by the process because there just wasn't many options available to her. So that's some really great advice. And then tip number 3, think like a business owner with every decision you make. What does that mean, and why is that important?
So yeah, you need to look at it from a business standpoint in terms of making sure that you have money set aside for certain repairs. You need to have kind of a certain reserve fund, so to speak, if anything were to go wrong. You need to have a long-term plan as well. How long do you think you're going to own that property for? How well do properties appreciate in that specific location, based on the duration of your expected time of ownership. So it kind of comes down to what we talked about for our first point. It's really just looking at it from a numbers standpoint, and not looking at it as an additional home I bought for myself, but really rather almost an additional business that you started for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I mean, I think we hear the term, we heard it recently, so I think Andrea's going to smile, where previously it was passive income. I'm going to rent my house as passive income. It isn't passive income. There is work that goes into that. And whether you manage it yourself, whether you have a property management company that assists you with that, it is not a matter of having a house and just hoping the right tenant shows up.
Yeah.
And that's a key part too. The right tenant is key. We work with some really great investors that I'm thinking of one in particular even, that he will keep it vacant if he has to until he finds the right tenant based on his business model. And it has worked for him. And that's important because otherwise it becomes a very difficult investment to manage if you don't have the right person in there. So thank you for those tips, Anthony. 3 great tips for real estate investors. Now we're going to get into a third niche buyer. It is the cottage buyer or the camp buyer or the hunt camp buyer. It's sort of that recreational property buyer. And this one's going to be a little different. When we talk with Anthony and Andrea, Andrea's going to be talking a little bit about sort of the Manitoulin market and what that looks like. And Anthony's going to be talking about all the great areas and all the many lakes around Greater Sudbury because they are a little bit different. And it is sort of a different market. It is a different buyer pool where they're coming from. So I think it's important that we differentiate between those two. So tip number 1, and Andrea, we're going to start with you. For waterfront, fall in love with the water frontage and not the building. What does that mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Because people are buying those secondary properties, those cottage properties, for the lifestyle that it affords them. So if you're all about getting, and I had this conversation with clients actually, what is your goal for your waterfront? I had this conversation on Friday, but you have to know what you want to use that waterfront property for. If you're all about tranquil, paddle boarding and kayaking and getting out on the pedal boat, you don't want to be on a really big body of water that's, got crashing waves all the time. And likewise, if you want to be on a body of water where you can put your sailboat in the water, you don't want to be on a small inland lake. On Manitoulin Island, there are some lakes that are even non-motorized. So you really have to make sure you know what your use for the waterfront is going to be. You know what the grade of the waterfront is. You know how accessible it is for putting in whatever your water sports or water needs are. So maybe is there a boat launch nearby if you're into boating? Do I need a boat lift here? Really think about your waterfront, but also really think about your surroundings as well. Have a look at how low or how high. You don't want to be you don't want to be flooded for your first 3 months of cottage season, because on Manitoulin Island, your cottage season isn't much more than 3 months. So you want to make sure that you're really paying attention to all of those things before you pay attention to the building. And obviously you're going to pay attention to the building. And if you're in love with the home that's on there, just make sure that the surroundings and the waterfront is going to suit your needs long term.
Okay. And also, I think you touched on it briefly. It's also grade of the property. Like we've had some clients that the couple would say, I have no intention of ever going in that water, but I want to have my morning coffee every day looking over it. So talk a little bit about grade differences and what that means.
Yeah, so there are a lot of, there's a lot of, especially on Manitoulin Island, and I imagine everywhere, but Manitoulin Island, there's a lot of places where, you have a flat grade or a very gentle slope to the water. But there are some amazing views, and it's basically you're perched on a cliff, and if you wanted to get to the water, you'd have to have some kind of intricate staircase taking you down there. So and some of those properties are amazing. I'm thinking of one or two right now that come to mind, and you're perched so high, but you have the best view, and you are seeing the best sunset. In some cases, you're seeing a sunset and a sunrise from the same property, and you've got a lookout. But getting down to your waterfront is going to be a little more difficult. In some cases, you are perched that high, and you've got a great staircase to get you there, but it has to work for your lifestyle. So you really have to pay attention to that. And if you're at the point in your life, where their stairs are not going to bother you, this might be the greatest place. But again, as we've talked about on other things, think long term. When it comes to those types of things. There's
so many people that approach us for the first time and ask for our help, and they've really never thought about that question.
Yeah.
And that's I actually heard you say it recently. I think Friday.
Yeah.
What are your intentions with the water?
Yeah.
Like what do you want to do? Because that also, especially on Manitoulin, determines, are you on big water? Are you on an inland lake?
Exactly.
Do you want a larger inland lake or a smaller inland lake?
Exactly. And then people are kind of taken aback by that when I say, okay, what's your intention for the water? They're like, what? No, it's really important because everybody's intention is different. I used as an example somebody who just wants to get out there and paddle about. And then another example is, there's an avid fisherman. And another example is somebody with a sailboat that needs to be close by. Those are all very different bodies of water. The guy who wants to just get out there and serenely paddle around a little bit might want a non-motorized lake or a really small lake that you're not going to have a lot of traffic on. The guy who wants to get out there and fish, there are specific lakes that are better for fishing than others. So we need to be concentrating our search there. The fellow that's got maybe some big fishing plans, but also has a sailboat, may need to be on the big water because that's what's going to work for them. So it is really important to assess what you want in a waterfront, and it's okay to want a bunch of things. You can say, I really love to fish, and the kids love to swim, but they want to jump off the dock, and my wife loves to get out and paddleboard. we can find you a lake that you can do all of those things, or a quiet bay, but we need to know what those things are so that we're steering you towards the right lake.
Great advice. Great advice. So, Anthony, we're going to bounce over to you. Tip number 2, every waterfront market is different, and that's why we've sort of split you two up. What does that mean, and why is it important to think about?
So, from in my experience, whenever people are looking for something closer in proximity to Sudbury, typically, they're looking for something that's easy to get to, something that is probably within an hour or so drive of the city. Something that doesn't have to be a very large planned trip, but they can kind of go to and from freely. And then it also really comes down to, if somebody's looking to have a property that they can use year round, or if it's seasonal, that can play a big role. I mean, we've seen properties as well that might be considered year round. However, from a practicality standpoint, if that buyer drives a Honda Civic, they might, have a hard time getting into that place. So, if there's a time when it can become,
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's something that's very important too, is understanding as a buyer your desires. Is this something that we're just going to come and use through the summer months, or is this, are we the type who want to come out here year round? Is the road maintained year round? Is the building winterized and that we can stay here comfortably? Do we need to access, do we need to take a skidoo across the lake to access the property? Lots and lots to think about in terms of that. But again, I'm finding the proximity to town is what a lot of buyers in Sudbury are really valuing when they're looking for their cottage property.
So what makes people want Manitoulin over Sudbury? If I'm a Sudbury buyer, Andrea, what do you know? What's that line that creates that? Is it the travel? What is it?
I'm not sure. I mean, there are a lot of people from Sudbury who are buying on Manitoulin Island. There's a lot of people from southwestern Ontario, southern Ontario, who are buying on Manitoulin Island. I think that the appeal of the island is something very specific. I don't think it has to do with proximity as much as the allure of the island. There is a certain feeling when you cross that bridge or when you get off that Chichiman that the island evokes. So I think people are looking for those specific communities. I think people are looking for that specific fishing experience, or for that specific waterfront experience, or that specific community experience when they go to Manitoulin Island. I think that people going to the island are looking for the island specifically, if they're coming from Sudbury especially. So I don't know that they're considering the length of the drive, because you can drive to the island in an hour and 15 minutes, or you can drive to your place on the island in 2.5 to 3 hours.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
So I think that people that are looking for Manitoulin Island are not looking specifically for the ease to get there from Sudbury. I think there is an allure that Manitoulin Island has. They've either spent time there as a kid, or they just are mesmerized by that feeling that you get, because there really is a feeling you get when you cross that bridge. It's just a far more relaxed pace, no matter what community you're in on the island. So I think people who are in Sudbury who just want a waterfront for ease and convenience, and they really love the waterfront, are a different rationale for the most part.
Okay. Awesome advice. And tip number 3, I'm going to go right back to you, Andrea. Okay. Buy the property based on how you want to use it. You sort of alluded to it already. Yeah. Why is this one? And this actually may be the most important of the 3, in my opinion. But why is this important?
Yeah, and I think Anthony touched on it as well. I mean, are you going to live there year round? Because that's going to possibly look a little bit different than the place that you're going to visit for the summer months, or occasionally in the winter. You need to, especially if we're talking about Manitoulin Island, and I don't know that we're talking only about Manitoulin Island, but you need to look at, there are a lot of roads that are only maintained in the summer months. There are a lot of roads that are private that you have to maintain on your own. So you really need to consider all of those things. Am I going to live here year round? Am I going to access it year round? Am I going to have a lot of company here? Is this accessible for me, both from my land and from the accessing my waterfront to use as I wish? perspective. So all of those questions, and you need to discuss those questions with your realtor, especially if it is not somewhere that you have spent a lot of time and grown up and know the back like the back of your hand. You need to have somebody that you can trust to say, okay, we were dealing with somebody again over the weekend.
Yep,
we were
yep,
busy on
yeah,
the weekend.
we were.
Busy on the weekend. We were dealing with somebody again on the weekend who asked us about a particular property. And because we listen to those clients and because we know they want to use it in the winter, we know they want to come and go frequently. And there's a really cute place that seemed to meet their needs if you look just at that lot and at that shell of a property. But knowing what we knew, we said, okay, here's what we need to tell you. You're going to need a 4-wheel drive in the summer. In the spring, you're going to get stuck in the mud. And, you know, we're telling them all of those things. And they're not necessarily going to get stuck in the mud, but it's not going to meet their needs. They're not going to be there occasionally. They want to be there all winter. They're going to need a snowmobile to get there in the winter. So those sorts of things are really important. Know when you're going to be using it, know what you're going to be using it for, know what your waterfront intentions are. Really paint a great picture of all the possibilities you want to make sure the property matches your needs.
And I've also, if I'm reading between the lines, and I think this is sort of an unofficial tip number 4, is if your realtor isn't asking you those questions, how are they truly able to help you find what you're looking for? If there's not some form of, and it could be informal, some form of consultation that really asks these questions and dives down, like the difficult question that you mentioned of what do you want to use the water for? If you're not being asked that, and how can anyone assist you and guide you?
Make sure your realtor knows the area that you're shopping in as well, whether it's Sudbury, you know, the outskirts of Sudbury or Manitoulin Island. Like if you're coming with a realtor that has no idea, you're both at risk, really. I mean, if somebody calls me up to see a property that I don't know anything about, you know that I'm going to check that property out, and I know the areas pretty well. I know the accessibilities pretty well. So make sure, that you are dealing with a realtor who really is going to say, talk to you about accessibility, talk to you about your needs, and make sure that they know whether or not your needs are going to fit that property or that property is going to fit your needs. Make sure your realtor knows the area that they're taking you to, because anybody can go somewhere once and say that's not bad. But when you're trekking somewhere every weekend or every week or for months at a time, and it becomes cumbersome, you're going to have some resentment towards that purchase if it doesn't work for you. So just be aware and make sure that the advice that you're getting and the guidance that you're getting really suits the area that you're looking in.
Okay. And then there's another really pressing question that I have to ask. Is it a camp or a cottage?
I am pleading the fifth on that. It is whatever I'll be honest, when I talk about it myself, I say camp.
Yeah.
But that's because of where I grew up. But if I'm talking to somebody who wants a cottage, then it's a cottage.
There you go.
And I've even had people who from Western Canada who've bought on the island, and they have cabins. And you know what? I sell cottages, I sell cabins, and I sell
there you go.
Camps. But I help you find the right one, whether it's a cottage, camp, or cabin.
Awesome. Okay, so before we sort of end off today, we've talked about 3 niche buyer groups. We've talked about right sizing, downsizing. We've talked about real estate investors, and we've talked about recreational property buyers. Anthony, what's one thing, if we were to find a soundbite of today, what's one thing that you sort of want to be in people's mind when they leave this?
I think the biggest takeaway just needs to be that if you're, regardless of which one of these properties you're looking at, have a plan, have a well thought through plan, take some time. Don't be afraid to ask your realtor questions, consult with your family if you're making a move with your family. And just make sure that you have a strategic, logical plan that you're sticking with, whether it's an investment, whether it's a recreational property, or you're downsizing. Because for reasons that we discussed earlier, it is very different than buying a house for yourself. So have a plan, stick to that plan, and don't be afraid to consult with your realtor. And yeah.
Great advice. Andrea, what's one thing that sticks with you about anything we talked about?
You know what? I don't want to copy off of Anthony, but be prepared. Be prepared. Know what your goals are for now and 10 years down the road. And in any of these cases, know what your goals are going to be so that you can plan and execute. Because it's great to have a loose plan, but you need to have a plan to execute, and you need to execute, or none of these properties are going to work for you.
And it's great to be impulsive, but we're talking about a lot of money here. And this sets you up, regardless of your investing, whether it's your recreational, it sets you up for the future of your family's existence. and doing it properly is important. So thank you both so much for your insight today. And thank you for joining us on Meaningful Moves, where we talked once again about the buyer's roadmap over the last 2 episodes. We hope that you found some of the information valuable to you and that you watch it, and feel free to ask us questions at any time. Until next time, take care.